Hey everyone, and welcome back. I am so excited for this deep dive. It seems like AI is everywhere these days, and well, it is. So today, we're going to be diving into the world of AI coding assistants.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing how fast this tech is advancing.
It really is. And I think it's only going to get, well, more and more mind-blowing, actually.
Definitely.
We'll be looking at how these tools are already changing the game for developers and what the future might hold.
It's going to be fascinating to unpack all of this.
For sure. So, to get us started, we've got a ton of research articles, blog posts, you name it, on three of the leading AI coding assistants out there: Cline, ADR, and Continue.
Each one has a unique approach, different strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much better idea of which one might be the right fit for you.
Or even if any of them are a good fit.
Yeah, good point. Okay, let's kick things off with Cline. It's the newest of the three, but it's already making waves with its approach to code completion.
It's really interesting how Cline tries to understand the context of your code, not just throw out random suggestions.
Right. It's not just about completing lines of code. It's about offering help that actually makes sense in the bigger picture of what you're building.
And that can save so much time and frustration.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the natural language to code translation, which is, I don't know, it almost feels like magic.
Yeah, the idea that you can just describe what you want the code to do, and Cline takes a crack at writing it for you.
Yeah. It's like, Cline, I need a function that sorts this list alphabetically, and boom, there it is.
It has the potential to make coding so much more accessible, even for people who aren't, hardcore programmers.
Totally. And on top of all that, Cline is super focused on privacy.
Which is a big deal these days.
Huge. Your code stays local, no sending it off to some server who knows where. And for developers working with sensitive data, that can be a deal breaker.
Absolutely. Cline seems to get that.
They do. But Cline's also pretty new, which means it has a couple of downsides.
Well, yeah, like any new technology, it's still maturing.
Right. For one thing, the language support isn't quite as broad as some of the other tools we'll be talking about.
If you're working with a less common language, you might run into some limitations.
And the community is still relatively small, which means fewer resources and tutorials and that kind of thing.
True, but it's growing fast.
Yeah, I think as more people discover Cline and its potential, that community will explode.
I think so too.
Okay, so that's Cline. Newcomer with a focus on context, privacy, and making coding more, I don't know, human.
Yeah, I like that.
Now let's switch gears and talk about AIDR, which stands for AI-Driven Development Revolution.
A pretty ambitious name.
It is, but AIDR kind of lives up to it, especially when it comes to sheer power. This thing can generate entire functions, classes, even the bare bones of a web application just from a description.
It's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI-assisted development.
And one of the articles we dug up talks about how AIDR can actually analyze your code and suggest ways to make it more efficient.
Oh yeah, the refactoring stuff, that's pretty cool.
Right. It's not just about writing code, it's about writing better code.
It's like having a senior developer looking over your shoulder, giving you tips and tricks.
And it can even help with debugging, which can be the bane of any programmer's existence.
But let's be honest, debugging is the worst.
It is. But AIDO can help you find and fix those pesky bugs faster, which means less time pulling your hair out and more time, actually building cool stuff.
Definitely. But all that power comes at a price.
Yeah, there are some trade-offs.
For one, AIDR can be pretty resource intensive. If you're working on an older machine, you might want to think twice.
And it's not exactly the easiest tool to learn either.
There's definitely a learning curve. It's packed with features, and mastering them takes time and effort.
It's a powerful tool for experienced developers, but it might not be the best choice for someone just starting out.
Right. It's like, you wouldn't give a Formula One race car to someone who's just learning to drive.
Perfect analogy. So we've got Cline, the newcomer focused on privacy and intuitive coding, and AD, the powerhouse for experienced developers. Now let's talk about Continue, which takes a different approach altogether.
Continue is all about, seamless integration with your workflow. It's like having a coding partner who's always on the same page as you.
Yeah, and it's really good at understanding the context of your code and offering suggestions that fit right in.
So it's not just throwing out random snippets. It's trying to understand your project's overall style and logic.
Exactly. And the conversational interface is pretty wild. You can actually talk to Continue, like, hey, can you explain this function to me? Or what's the best way to do this?
It's like having a coding buddy who's always there to answer your questions.
And a really smart buddy, too. It can even explain complex code concepts in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a great tool for learning no matter what your skill level.
But of course, Continue's not perfect either.
Well, no tool is, right?
True. One thing to keep in mind is that all that context awareness can sometimes make it a bit slow.
Especially if you're working on a large project.
Yeah. And some people worry that, relying too much on Continue might make developers lazy.
That's a valid concern, but I think, as with any tool, it's all about using it responsibly.
For sure. So we've got Cline, ADR, and Continue. Three very different approaches to AI coding assistance.
And each one has its own unique strengths and weaknesses.
It's really about finding the tool that best fits your needs and your workflow.
Exactly. So how do we decide which tool is right for which situation?
That is a great question, and that is what we are going to tackle in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm excited to dig into that.
Me too. See you soon. Okay, so we've gotten a feel for Cline, ADR, and Continue, but how do they actually compare, head to head?
Yeah, let's break it down.
Let's start with one of the most basic things, code generation. How much code can these things actually, pump out?
Well, it really depends on the tool and what you're trying to do.
Okay, so, Cline is really good at those smaller snippets, especially when you use the natural language input.
Right. You can just tell it what you want, and it'll take a shot at writing it.
Super helpful for those quick tasks or when you're just trying to wrap your head around a new concept.
Now, AID is a different beast altogether.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this thing can crank out entire functions, classes, you name it.
Wow. So if you need to build something complex, ADR is the way to go.
It can definitely save you a ton of time, especially in the early stages of a project.
And then there's Continue, which kind of takes a different approach, right?
Yeah, Continue is all about fitting into your existing code base. So it's more about suggesting completions and snippets that make sense in the context of your project.
So it's not necessarily about generating a ton of code from scratch, but about helping you write better code within the framework you've already got.
Exactly. It's like having a partner who knows your code as well as you do.
I like that. So it's not just about how much code they can generate, but the type of code and how it fits into your workflow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of workflow, let's talk about language support.
Right, because not all languages are created equal, are they?
Not at all. And this is where AIDR really shines. It has, I think, the most comprehensive language support out of the three.
So no matter what language you're using, AIDR's got your back.
Pretty much. It covers everything from the popular languages like Python and JavaScript to some of the more niche ones.
Now, what about Continue?
Continue has good language support too. Maybe not quite as extensive as AIDR, but still pretty solid.
And Cline, is it lagging behind a bit?
Well, Cline's still pretty new, so its language support is catching up, but it's not quite there yet.
Got it. Okay, so code generation, language support, but let's not forget about how these tools can actually help us become better developers,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
These aren't just time-saving tools. They can actually help us learn and grow.
So how do they stack up in that regard?
Well, like we were saying earlier, Cline's natural language interface is great for understanding new concepts.
Right, you can describe what you want in plain English, and Cline will try to translate that into code.
It can be really eye-opening to see how your ideas can be expressed in code, even if you're not a coding expert.
And what about Ada? How does it help with learning?
AIDR can actually generate multiple different implementations for the same task, which is pretty cool.
So you can see how different programmers might approach the same problem.
Exactly. It's a great way to learn about different coding styles and best practices.
And Continue, we talked about how it can explain code, right?
Oh, yeah. Continuous code explanation feature is amazing. It can break down complex code into bite-sized pieces and explain what each part does.
It's like having a coding tutor built right into your IDE.
Exactly. So no matter which tool you choose, you're bound to learn something new along the way.
Okay, so we've covered code generation, language support, and learning. What else is there?
Well, let's talk about integration. How well did these tools play with the other tools and workflows?
Right, because nobody wants to be switching back and forth between a million different applications.
Exactly. And this is another area where AIDR really excels.
Really?
Yeah, it has a ton of plugins and integrations with popular IDEs, version control systems, all that good stuff.
So it can fit right into your existing workflow.
Seamlessly.
Mm.
Now, Continue is no slouch when it comes to integration either, especially with version control systems.
Makes sense given its focus on collaboration.
Right. And Cline, well, it's still catching up in this area.
Being the new kid on the block and all.
Yeah, but they're working on it.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about performance.
Yeah.
Nobody wants a tool that's going to slow their computer down to a crawl.
Definitely. And in terms of performance, Cline is pretty lightweight.
So even if you're working on an older machine, Cline should run smoothly.
Yeah, it's designed to be efficient. Continue is somewhere in the middle.
Not too heavy, not too light.
Right. And AIDR can be a bit of a resource hog.
All that power has to come from somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, you'll definitely want a decent machine if you're going to be using AIDR a lot.
So there you have it, a side-by-side comparison of cleaning, AIDR, and continue. But how do these theoretical differences actually play out in the real world? That's what I'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about these AI coding assistants in theory, but how do they actually work in practice?
Yeah, let's get down to some real-world use cases.
All right, so first scenario. Imagine you're starting a brand new project and you need to build a prototype, like as fast as humanly possible.
Speed is key in those early stages.
Absolutely. So which tool would you reach for?
For me, it would have to be AIDR,
AIDR. Why is that?
because AIDR can generate so much code so quickly. Think about it. You need to set up a basic web server, create a few API endpoints, handle some database interactions.
Yeah, that's a lot of boilerplate code, even for a simple prototype.
Exactly. And with AIDR, you could potentially describe all that functionality in like a paragraph or two, and it could generate a good chunk of the structure for you.
Wow, that could save days, maybe even weeks of development time, easily. And that time saved means you can get your prototype in front of users faster, gather feedback, and iterate more quickly.
Okay, so AIDR for rapid prototyping makes sense. Now, let's say you're learning a new programming language and you're really struggling with a particular algorithm like, oh, I don't know, quicksort.
Quicksort, the classic.
The classic. It's one of those algorithms that every programmer needs to know, but it can be a bit tricky to wrap your head around at first.
Yeah, all those recursive calls and pivoting, it can get confusing.
So which tool would you recommend for a situation like this?
I would say continue would be your best friend in this case.
Continue. Why continue?
Because continue can explain code like no other tool I've seen.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Right. You could paste that quicksort code into continue and basically have a conversation with it.
A conversation with the code?
Yeah. You could ask continue to explain each step, break down the logic, show you how the data is being manipulated, all of that.
That's amazing. It's like having a coding tutor right there in your IDE.
Exactly. And for learning complex algorithms, I think that kind of interactive step-by-step explanation is invaluable.
I totally agree. Okay, one last scenario. You're working on a massive code base, thousands upon thousands of lines of code, with a whole team of developers.
The kind of project where you can get lost in the tunnel for days.
Exactly. So in that kind of environment, how would you use these AI coding assistants?
Honestly, I think I'd use a combination of Cline and AIDR.
Oh, interesting. Why both?
Well, think about it. Cline is really good at understanding complex code bases, navigating through all those files and functions.
So if you're a new developer on the team, or even if you're just working on a new part of the code base, Cline can help you get up to speed quickly.
Exactly. And then when it comes to actually making changes or adding new features, AIDR's power can really come into play.
Because you could use AIDR to generate those larger chunks of code, and it would all fit within the existing structure.
Yes. And AIDR can also help with refactoring, which is crucial in a large project like that.
Right, because you want to make sure your code is clean, efficient, and maintainable, especially when you've got a whole team working on it.
And with AIDR, you can automate a lot of that refactoring process, which frees up your time to focus on the more creative, high-level aspects of development.
Okay, so Cline for navigation and understanding, AIDR for power and refactoring. That's a pretty powerful combination.
It is, and I think it really highlights the fact that these AI coding assistants aren't just about replacing developers, they're about augmenting our abilities and making us more productive.
I totally agree. It's all about working together, humans and AI, to build better software faster.
And I think that's something to be excited about.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of AI coding assistants.
It was quite a journey.
It was. We've learned about Cline, AIDR, and Continue, explored their strengths and weaknesses, and even peeked into the future of this exciting technology.
And the future looks bright.
It does. So whether you're a seasoned programmer or just starting out, I encourage you to check out these tools and see how they can transform your coding experience.
You might be surprised at what you can accomplish.
And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to build the next game-changing AI coding assistant.
The possibilities are endless.
They are. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.